Please, can you remind me if you'll be so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? With purple angel, purple angel.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm Lori LeBay, the host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks. For those of you that are new and just tuning in today, I want to give you a little background about us. Alzheimer Speaks is an advocacy-based program that provides multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort worldwide. We believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations about life with dementia, like we're going to do today, that we're going to be able to remove some of the stigmas attached to memory loss and help people live full lives with the disease. And we really appreciate you tuning in to listen in today. One of the things that we've also found, and we really believe strongly at our core, is that the only way we're going to win this battle against dementia is to be collaborative. And I know that that's working because of all of your likes and clicks and shares with your Facebook friends, your Twitter tribe, your LinkedIn colleagues, your Pinterest people, because of all of you just taking those seconds, which doesn't seem like a lot of time when you're listening to the show and pushing the show out. We were recognized as the number one influencer online regarding Alzheimer's by ShareCare and Dr. Oz, and that surely would not have happened without your help. So I just really want to say thank you to all of you for helping with that, and if you can continue that, we would love the support. I know even in my own circle of friends, there are people that don't talk about dementia, but they're dealing with it. And then all of a sudden, enough things start hitting them where they feel safe to bring up the conversation. And so I think that happens with everybody's circle of influence, that there's people out there that want to talk about it, just aren't sure how to approach it, not sure if it's safe or not. And the more information we can get out to them, the easier we're going to make that happen for them. I also want to mention that we interview everybody all over the world. So if you are a person who just got diagnosed and has a story to tell, maybe you've been living with the disease a while, we'd love to hear from you. Maybe you're caring for a loved one or a friend. Maybe you are a business professional. Maybe you're someone who has written a song, wrote a book, done a short video series or training. We want to hear it all. Maybe you're involved in research. We've even had Harvard Research on the show. So everybody is valued here. So reach out to me at alzheimerspeaks.com and let me know if you think you might be a great guest. Because, again, we know we have to work together to get this all kind of put to bed and make people feel comfortable with this, kind of get this disease out of the closet and onto the street, and get our communities and our families more dementia-friendly and more aware. Now, before I introduce our guest, I always like to give a shout-out to a couple of my colleagues here at Alive and Social. And the first one is Mortgages and BS. And Mortgages and BS has a great show on Thursdays at 4 o'clock. You'll talk with one of our local mortgage bankers here, and also his sidekick, BT, and they discuss mortgages and all things regarding homes and housing. And so, check them out. You'll get some great information and hear some good stories and banters as well. Another show I just kind of want to highlight is Apples to Apples, and that is every Monday at 2:30 with father and son team, the Applebombs, and you can check them out. You'll hear all about sports and what's going on there. They're pretty fun to listen to, and you'll find out if father truly knows best or not during their conversations. A couple other organizations I want to shout out to is a lot of people don't know about the Purple Angel Project, and the Purple Angel is the new global symbol for dementia. It's free to anybody as an individual or a business. And again, you can go to our website, alzheimerspeaks.com. If you're here in the U.S., go to initiatives and projects and just click on that tab. And you can ask me to send you a link to the Dropbox. It'll have all the information there. If you are not in the U.S., it'll also give you a link to go to the global site as well. Another organization I always like to mention that a lot of people don't know about is Alzheimer's Disease International, known as ADI. And ADI is a great organization. They're basically the association of all the Alzheimer's associations around the world. And not only can you find who's closest to you, but you're going to find some great global research there as well, which is wonderful. And last, I just want to give a shout out to HealthStar Home Health, who provides services here in the Twin Cities, and they are just a fantastic company doing some cutting edge work with dementia and caregiving. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our guest here today. Very excited to have him. He's coming to us today all the way from Iceland, and his name is Scott Kirschenbaum. And he did a documentary film, which is really interesting. And he's just a wonderful guy with a great background. He has participated in the San Francisco Film Society. And in addition to Alzheimer's documentaries, he's recently produced a speaker series called Soapbox in Haiti, which premiered on 4 television stations over there. And it's just rolling up on the 1-year anniversary of the earthquake there. And it was featured on ABC World News. He is the director and producer of the film we're going to talk about today, which some of you may have seen some of the trailers for, and it's called You're Looking at Me Like I Live Here, and I Don't. And it's just a fabulous, fabulous film. So I'm really excited to have Scott with us. So welcome, Scott.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Well, your film is really quite amazing. I just even the picture of it, kind of with the half the face, that you have there of this woman, I think just says a lot in and of itself. Can you give us a little background in terms of, why did you decide to make this film?
Yeah, sure. Well, my background was mostly in screenwriting prior to doing this project. And I became very infatuated with this idea of telling the story from the perspective of someone who can't really tell their own story, or as the term goes, an unreliable narrator. Mm-hmm. And so obviously, clearly, someone with Alzheimer's or dementia really has a difficult time maintaining lucidity and following a linear path in their speech pattern. So I did a great deal of research, and I actually wrote a screenplay that I was interested in making before I found the subject for this film, Lee, and then opted to turn this into a documentary project.
Okay. Now, it's obvious, or it seems obvious, after watching the film, that you're an activist for elderly. I'm just kind of curious, and I'm sure our listeners are, have you been personally touched by family or friends with, Alzheimer's or another form of dementia?
I've never had a relative who had Alzheimer's or other dementia, but I did do a great deal of research and in this field, and I also made a documentary when I was in college called Joomer, and it was a story through Jewish humor told from the perspective of nursing home residents in 14 nursing homes around the country. So just from that experience, I really wanted to dig in deeper into the nursing home community and found that memory awareness units were a great place to start.
Okay, great. Now, you've had a chance to screen this film, all over the country. What kind of reactions have you gotten from the film?
I mean, honestly, I'm amazed at how much this film has received in terms of its response and its reach. Now it's been shown all around the world. And is being used for educational purposes and in nursing homes and for teaching purposes with caregivers. And I really think of this as sort of like the little engine that could, because at the start it was really focused exclusively on trying to tell this one woman's story. And yes, I was doing a residency with the San Francisco Film Society, but I never imagined that PBS would want to broadcast this nationally, and then it would have a sort of a series of screenings for the last 5 years since it originally broadcast.
Wow.
So I mean, it's been truly remarkable, and it's very incredible to see how much the community that you're really at the center of has rallied around this film and used it as a teaching tool. And I receive kind of emails or fan mail pretty much once a week, or at least a few times a month, from people who can relate to Lee and can relate to this unit and want to do a screening event in their community. And so I just believe that it's a real treat to see it out there and to see people still interested in the project.
Okay. Can you tell our audience a little bit about the storyline?
Sure. Well, the movie, as you mentioned, is called You're Looking at Me Like I Live Here and I Don't. And the general conceit is that we focus the entire movie in one Alzheimer's and other dementia unit. We never leave the unit at all during the course of the film. And we also do not, really integrate any perspective from a doctor or a family member. It's exclusively told from the perspective of this one woman whose name is Lee Gorwitz, and her unit is in Danville, California, outside of Oakland. So we're trying to say, for the audience, we want to fully immerse you in her universe, her daily life, and we want to really kind of try to depict what it's like for her to move from activity to activity, from caregiver to caregiver, and also what is it like for her to tell her own biography. So we do a series of interview sequences throughout the film and try to kind of play off the nonlinear patterns that happen to come up in an Alzheimer's and other dementia unit. So it's a lot different. I think for your audience, it'll be a lot different from other documentaries they've seen, especially a lot of other Alzheimer's documentaries, which are told from the perspective of doctors or family members or some mix therein. We kind of definitely studied all the other Alzheimer's and dementia documentaries that were out there and wanted to tell this story in a pretty unique and different way. Okay.
So how did you come to find Lee and convince her to be part of this?
That's a great question. We were doing a lot of the research for this project. The production team and I were in the Bronx at an Alzheimer's and dementia unit in the Bronx, and so that's where I started writing a screenplay for this film. And then I, was doing some work out in LA and decided to go up to San Francisco. And at that time, I met the rabbi for this nursing home, which is called the Reutlinger Community for Jewish Living. And so I met the rabbi, and the rabbi introduced me to the executive director of the nursing home. And her name is Jan Karan, and she's a complete angel. And she actually had done some consulting work for the Oscar-winning short documentary Complaints of a Dutiful Daughter, which I'm sure a lot of your audience has seen. It's a significant early documentary from the 80s about the sort of relationship between a daughter who's putting her mom into, or helping her mom move into a Alzheimer's and dementia unit, and also kind of giving commentary on her own life. So that's a very unique film. And the fact that the director of this nursing home had experience with documentaries previously played such a huge role in this project. And so after our first tour of the facility, the executive director of the nursing home said, I want to see you make this project. I want to give you carte blanche. And I really want you to be, an integral part of that unit. So for 6 months, we were visiting the Alzheimer's and Dementia unit pretty much 3 times a week and spending a lot of time with the director of that unit, and who is also just a tremendous woman, Karen Kelleher. And she was giving us all sorts of tidbits and pointers about how to make sure this was as authentic a documentary as it possibly could be, and really trying to help us hone in on this idea to make sure that we were, that we are as accurately as possible seeing the world through the eyes of someone with Alzheimer's.
Okay. Now, did Lee have family and stuff that you had to kind of convince to be part of this process?
And that's a great question, too. We spent the 6-month period in the unit and among the community with the family. So in a way, I was the sort of like de facto grandson that was visiting a lot of the residents, and really making sure that they were comfortable with me. I was attending a lot of the family dinners when relatives would come in, and and I presented the scope of the project to the community. There are 20 residents in this unit, and so meeting with all the family members, especially with Lee's family. She had 2 children during the time of the filmmaking process. Sadly, one of her sons has passed away since the film aired, but I became quite close with her son and her daughter and her daughter-in-law. And so, just meeting with them and getting to see hundreds of photos of Lee from throughout her life. Yes, we were focusing on where Lee was at in this current present moment when she was 79 years old, but prior to that, it was just incredible to see this potpourri of just an exhilarating life that she lived from the age of, from her time in Brooklyn, New York, all the way through moving to Florida and then moving out to the West Coast to be closer to her children.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very.
So, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, ultimately, we were able to secure permission. I mean, I think this is pretty remarkable and a testament to the compassion and the interest of the children. But 19 of 20 residents' children signed off on letting us film in the unit, and all the caregivers and all the staff there. You can't make a film. This is the first, film in an Alzheimer's and other dementia unit, and you just can't do that if you do not have full buy-in and support. And this was essentially my extended family during the pre-production process. When we were there for 6 months, I knew everyone, by their first name, and I really got a sense of the flow of the unit, because each unit has a different feel to it.
Sure. What were some of the challenges in terms of working on a unit? I would imagine there had to be some.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I would say, the most clear challenge is that your subjects aren't going to remember your name from one day to the next, aren't going to be able to follow you exactly when you ask a question. I mean, especially with someone in the medium to advanced stage of the disease. And obviously this disease manifests itself in a different way with each person who suffers from it. But in total, the greatest challenge is you just don't have any certainty of what you're going to go in and film from one day to the next. So, with a film that, you kind of try to set out a production schedule or a plan, and you really need to have complete leeway, no pun intended, given the subject name. You just need to be willing and able to go in any direction that is necessary for the subjects, and also to be understanding when things happen in a unit. You're in a very sensitive space. Mm-hmm. So it's so dissimilar from any other documentary project I've done. And it's, also each day before we went in there, we, had to take some time to meditate for a bit, to really compose ourselves, because the stronger we were, the more capable we were of kind of buttressing the overall, energy of the unit, and trying to lift the spirits of the residents there, keep them awake, keep them attentive, keep them participating in activities, and try to really help out as much as we could during the filmmaking process.
Okay. Now, I would imagine that had to be really interesting, because you always think of films and budgets and time frames and stuff, and to lose a lot of that control, just given the environment that you're in. You had talked earlier about, watching people, watching Lee basically go from activity to activity and caregiver to caregiver. What did you see when she went from activity to activity? Did something, as a person who hasn't dealt with the disease itself, was there anything that kind of shocked you or made you just go, wow, I had no idea?
Well, Lee is a pretty exceptional woman. During this filmmaking process, I found that her to be kind of the most charismatic and humorous individual I've ever met with this disease, with Alzheimer's or dementia. And so I'd say the biggest challenge was her volatility. She was both so endearing from day to day and activity to activity, but also such a dominant presence in the facility. And one of the reasons why we decided to title this film the way we did, which is, a pretty lengthy title, is because of the duality of Lee in this space. And that is that she kind of held herself as outside of the other residents who lived there. And at times she was a bully to other residents who lived there. And she was really hobnobbing and mingling with a lot of the caregivers. In a way, she thought she sort of had this omnipotence in a regard of like understanding what the happenings and goings on of the unit, and also didn't really feel like it was necessary to be, in every activity, but rather kind of pick and choose how she moved through the space. So the biggest challenge was, being able to work with her through those more difficult moments when she was really down and really depressed, or when she really was frustrated with what was going on in the unit. I'd say that was one of the biggest hurdles for making this film, because it takes a lot out of you. You're making it as a director. I was trying to make myself emotionally available to each of the residents, and when someone starts, crying off in the corner or in her room, you can't help but feel really aggrieved and sad that you can't do more to help her. So I'd say that was the biggest challenge, working through those volatile moments. And I'd say another, challenge but / opportunity was really integrating the caregiver community into the filmmaking process. We had, it was necessary for us to have a caregiver with us at all times, no matter where we were in the unit. And so in a way, they were an extension of our production team. So while that some people might think that's, challenging because they don't know about film, I really saw it as a big benefit for how to make this project. And I'd ask them questions about, maybe any suggestions they might have for an interview, or for where we could set up the camera that would be convenient. And, this film is very much a testament of their day-to-day labor, because, caregivers are the unsung heroes of the memory and dementia unit. You never hear how wonderful they are from people who, don't visit the unit on a daily basis, but I know they're the life force of that space.
Yep. Yeah, that's very, very true. Do you think, in terms of the film, do you think that you were also able to highlight the caregivers' roles? Do you think that stood out at all in the film?
I do. I think that, obviously, when you're in a unit, an individual who lives there probably interacts with 3 to 5 different caregivers through the course of a day. And, at different blocks of time, a different caregiver is assigned to that resident. I would say, in general, each of these mini interactions, because the film is composed of a series of vignettes. It's kind of starts when she wakes up in the morning and ends sort of right before dinner time and the sun sets, and when people might experience sundowning. So through that expanse of time, the caregiver, those mini interactions were beautiful, and in a way, Lee would create this sort of Abbott and Costello dynamic where the caregiver might be the straight person and Lee would be the jokester. And that was just phenomenal, the way that they responded to her and her sense of humor.
Wow. One of the things when I was reading over, you had sent just a great press kit with, and you had talked initially about, you wrote this screenplay that you had intended to film entirely in an Alzheimer's unit. And after many weeks of rehearsal, you say, I arrived at a troubling realization that I was not just making a challenging film, I was just making the wrong film. What the heck do you do as a director at that point when you're knee deep into it?
Well, I think that's sort of a microcosm for the complete experience that an individual, especially someone who is caregiving to someone with Alzheimer's, that they face. So some people, when they find someone who, their relative, they learn that they have Alzheimer's and other dementia, it's obviously crushing and debilitating in so many different ways. But you hear every so often of that story where the relative or the parent is sort of experiencing that zen of dementia, the zen of Alzheimer's. You hear talk of that. And though you can't communicate in the same way or have this lengthy, completely directed conversation, what you can do is follow whims and just go in any direction you want. And so for me, I just had to throw my hands up in the air and say, hey, this is what sort of fate commands, and that I just need to believe fully that Lee is so compelling and such a moving figure that I should invest the entire film scope into her story and her experience. So for me, it was, very frustrating to have to tear up that screenplay that I had before, but also, what can you do? And that's kind of a big lesson that I've learned, that, in the filmmaking process, especially with documentary films, you don't get to make the same film that you conceived of from the onset when you were just writing your initial grant proposals. Mm-hmm. You have to accept that things come up during that filmmaking process, and sometimes they're detrimental to what you want to do, but sometimes they're the greatest blessing you could receive. And for me, that was the case with this project.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love a couple of other statements in here. One is your composer, John Gage, once wrote, he says, the first question I ask myself when something doesn't seem to be beautiful is, why do I think it's not beautiful? And very shortly you discover there is no reason. And it's just like, wow, it doesn't have to have a reason. It just, there's that shift and things just change. And then you also write it kind of in summary here that until there's a cure for Alzheimer's, there's one way outside of medicine to counter this disease, something we all have within our reach, whatever the road, whatever our relative agility to transversing it. And it's empathy. And, empathy is something we just really don't talk about a whole lot, but it's so critical to our relationships. And, I think it's kind of why the world is almost cracking right now. I mean, we're seeing so much upheaval as we've lost that ability. We don't teach it. We don't lead with it. We don't show it as much as I think as it needs to be done. And I think the film does that beautifully. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. Is there one scene that just kind of stands out to you that just, kind of makes your chest puff up and that you're excited about every time you see it play?
Well, we do screening events pretty regularly at universities for dementia research programs, neuroscience programs, gerontology programs, nursing programs, and consistently and regularly, I know that when we reach the scene where Lee is dancing to Beyond the Sea, it's, if the audience can get with that scene, can really appreciate that scene, then they're sold for the rest of the film, because, that's just amazingly great timing to be able to see Lee, this woman who's pretty much on her own through the unit, decide that she's going to have herself this fantastic dance to Beyond the Sea. So that's always like I'd say the greatest crowd pleaser, if you will. But for me, I also say that some of the, especially with the quote you just read, that some of the sadder moments in the film, or some of the times when we're doing interviews, I can also point to those moments as well. And, one thing I consistently hear from audience members is that, although they can't understand exactly what Lee is saying, they understand the feeling of what she is saying. And that really, I think, speaks to a greater objective for this project and for how people relate to individuals with Alzheimer's. You need, the word empathy always comes up, because you can't expect to have the same conversation that you had with these individuals before they started losing their mental faculties, or their capacity for memory. And so, to me, any moment that it comes up in the unit, even if it's just like complete absurdity, might have some resonance and truth to it. And so I really encourage people, and I worked on this project with a group of 20-somethings. We were all a pretty young team of filmmakers. And for them, a lot of them had never even met someone with Alzheimer's or other dementia. And I just tried to say to them, hey, don't make a judgment right away. Don't tell me just right off the bat that this is too depressing or too difficult. Go in there and spend 2 hours with the residents and see how that feels, and that really made the film project a lot more easy to accomplish, and the production process a lot more healthful and holistic.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, one of the things that was stated about your film was that it takes a simple but bold step of making an Alzheimer's kind of only tale, which is pretty rare. Usually there's a bigger plot and stuff. And it says it's not a plot point that propels a narrative. It's an inescapable box. And that is just such a great visual, I think, of the disease. And I think most people with it would agree with that. It's just something that has limits, and you don't really know where those limits are going to be from day to day or moment to moment. As the disease kind of ebbs and flows in someone's life. But if care partners can start looking at it more in that light, I think that will greatly help. When you show this at universities, who generally is your audience? Is it more of a medical mix, or social services, or is it just general population?
Yeah, it's a mix of all of those. Usually the host for these events will be a professor within one of those subject matters that I've mentioned, and so they'll bring the film to campus and perhaps dovetail this screening event with a larger, say, Alzheimer's and dementia awareness program on campus. So, maybe it's trying to discuss some of the, legislation that's going on within the community, or maybe there's a, special anniversary for the number of years that they've been researching this subject matter. But usually what will happen is the host of the event, or the MC, will give a 10-minute background to their relationship to this disease, what research they're doing, or what family member they've worked with who's had this illness and disease, and then they'll screen the film, and afterwards we'll have a panel discussion with approximately 3 professors, maybe someone from the Alzheimer's Association or another caregiving organization in the community, and then also maybe we'll bring in someone from another art discipline as well. So sometimes it could be someone from the humanities, or from the nursing department, or even someone from the anthropology department, just to give this outside perspective on what they're seeing in the film. But usually it will always have, kind of as much as possible, the foremost expert on the dementia research that's happening on campus. We love to get their response because, ultimately the conversations we have center on three areas of focus. One is, kind of the content of the film. Another is the research that university or community is doing on this disease. And the third is, what are the resources that are available within that community. So we have students who are there. Some of them are getting extra credit for attending the event and writing a synopsis of their experience watching the film. We have people from the public that are coming there, and sometimes we'll have someone from the audience stand up and say, I was just diagnosed a week or 2 ago with this disease. I'm devastated. Is there any hope, doctor? And that's just a pretty chilling experience to have that happening in a Q&A after a film event. But that's the reality. That is the inescapable box. And so what I love about doing these screening events is that for 30 or 45 minutes after the film, people are invigorated and animated about talking through what's possible and coming up with some sort of answers, some solutions, trying to help out other audience members as well. And it's so just wonderful to get to meet people who are doing their part.
Yeah. I find the talkbacks real interesting. I'm working with a film right now called His Neighbor Phil. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it hasn't been on the big screen, and you can only see it through sponsors, but we always do talkback. And it's amazing the conversations that are had and the comfort level people have and the intimate details that they're talking about in their life to a group of total strangers. And I would imagine your film, like His Neighbor Phil, a lot of times I have to talk for 5 or 10 minutes and kind of be vulnerable myself, sharing what I felt and what I experienced, because the audience can't even talk. They're just, the emotions are so strong with it. And to me, that's really a cool place to be, because I think that's where change happens.
Absolutely.
And
sorry, please.
Oh,
yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the most remarkable experiences I've had at a screening event, and, I love mentioning this is I did a screening at Bowdoin College in Maine, and this was obviously a cold fall day, and afterwards I got up onto the stage and sat next to three professors, and I was looking down at my shoes, waiting for the MC or to start talking through the first questions or speaking to each of the professors, and suddenly I look over and all three of the professors are wiping tears from their eyes, and they can't even begin to, they ask for a few extra minutes before we begin the conversation. I just thought that was amazing, to see, for me especially, and I hear this from researchers a lot, they don't see the human side of this, this sort of like in-depth human side of the story that often. So to see films like, maybe the film that you're screening, or the film that I made, or any of these other, there are so many Alzheimer's and other dementia documentaries coming out right now. So any of these films can really be an amazing conversation starter, and also give people a lot, the kind of necessary community experience that they need, because caregiving is so solitary at times.
Exactly. I know when we were kind of devising kind of a marketing plan and stuff, they're like, should we put it on the big screen? Should we, do the film festivals? What should we do? And I said, if you really want to help people, we need to get it into smaller venues where people feel safe and comfortable, and where we can tap them into resources. Because that's what community needs. That's what even staff needs. Because they do feel isolated. And, sometimes people forget how much knowledge they have until they hear somebody else doesn't have it yet. And, to get them to share. And to me, that's just a magnificent thing to see, too. How did you come up with the title, Scott?
Well, without giving, I guess, too much away, I will say that this line is related to an interview sequence that happens in the film with Lee. And I just think, in reflecting, I had a different title from the onset, and that title was Three Bagel Sunday, which I know is a pretty out there title. And for me, I just kind of wanted to capture the word salad poetry that you often hear people with Alzheimer's and other dementia say. And so ultimately in post-production, we wanted to change the title, and we're bouncing around a few different ideas, but that expression just kept coming up for me. You're looking at me like I live here and I don't. And that is what Lee's life is like when she's in that space. And also, I've heard a linguistics professor talk about that sort of duality in the title, that, you're looking at me like she lives here or like she's alive in that space, but also there's this doubt of whether that the sort of veracity of that, to what extent is she alive in that space, and to what extent is she sort of transitioning to that threshold space, as people who continue to lose their memory do. So it sort of speaks to Lee being present, but also being absent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, which I think people with dementia would say all the time. Sometimes there's those. I mean, even my mom had dementia for 30 years, so she started at my age in her mid 50s. And lived to 86. And even in her last 4 years, when she was in her end stages, there would just be moments. I mean, and it was just short seconds of such vivid clarity and connection. And you just kind of go, wow, where'd that come from? And yet you were just so appreciative that it showed itself, and that you were able to witness it, just those seconds, and how, how they just touch your heart and they change your life forever. Very cool.
Absolutely.
Now your film has been called, really groundbreaking, and I would totally have to agree with that. Can you give us like 3 points of why you think you got, that's just huge buzz to be able to have that with the film that you've made. Can you give us 3 points of why you think people just saw it as something they've never seen before?
I think, I mentioned, the first thing is, and you can see this in the trailers, that we try to, humbly say that this is the first film that was shot entirely in an Alzheimer's and dementia unit and told entirely from the perspective of someone with the disease. So that's just right off the bat, we want to establish the sort of artistic space that we are working in for this project. And then, secondly, I really think Lee carries the film more so than anything else. People love Lee. People respond to Lee, and people just continuously say, "Oh, I've been thinking about Lee for the last week since the film came out. I'm saying these phrases that Lee said in the film, and I just can't help but feel like Lee is somehow related to my mom, who may have passed away a year or two or however long ago." So Lee is just, she's an all-star whippersnapper, if you will. And then, third, I would credit a lot to PBS's documentary program, Independent Lens, because they've worked with a lot of projects that deal with Alzheimer's and dementia. I know recently they aired Banker White's film, Genius of Marianne, and I think they really catalyzed this project into the larger world of documentaries, and also really getting it into the niche where people who care about this disease would be able to see it. So they've really enabled it to get out to such a large audience. We had, I guess 2 million viewers, the initial broadcast air date. And since then, we've had all these downloads and different ways of distributing the film that PBS is really centrally responsible for. And I credit them because they are, in my mind, unequivocally the most compassionate film organization in the country, hands down. They're amazing. They're beautiful. And the director of this program, Lois Fossen, she is a renegade for the documentary cause and has done so much for independent filmmakers like myself. So I think those are the three main reasons why the film's been able to get out there for as long as it has.
Wonderful. Now, with the film, was there anything that was really a big surprise to you, other than, you ripped up your script and started all over from what you were thinking you were going to do? Anything that just really caught you one day on set as you were filming?
I'd say in a general sense, I did not realize a big question that kept coming up was, will an audience be able to stay with and stay committed to a subject with this disease, where it's just her for the most part? Well, how long would an audience be willing to stay with this subject? And at first I thought, maybe this is a movie that'll be 2 hours long. And then when we started doing the first rough cut and feedback screenings, we were working with a film that was about 80-ish minutes long. And it was only when one of the directors from the San Francisco Film Society said, "Hey, PBS does these films at 53 minutes. Why don't you try winnowing it down to that length?" Only when that happened did I really start to see how logical the structure for the film could be. And that's kind of an interesting thing to say, because the post-production process with this film was particularly time intensive. Sure. I'm going through and listening to all these long speeches that Lee was giving during interview sequences. I'd ask her the same question 10 or 15 different times, and just trying to piece together a narrative that an audience could really relate to, connect with, and feel for. And so I think that process was particularly gratifying to me. And I also was surprised by finding, that I kind of likened it to organizing a book of poetry. You have 30 or 40 poems, and you need to figure out where each poem goes, and also how to segue from the last poem to the next poem. And that's very similar to a unit, because you could be at a meal one day and suddenly one of the residents gets up and is, in their room picking up a purse and maybe trying to put on a fancy ballroom dancing hat. That could happen within the span of 3 minutes. And instead of saying, "Oh, that is inane," or "That's ridiculous," how about looking at it and saying, that is just the truth of that space. Anything goes. So as a director, my attitude was, hey, I just need to deal with it. I need to work with it, and I need to support this.
Wonderful. Well, and I love that attitude. Anything goes, because you can't argue with them. You're not going to, the logic piece is gone, but yet everyone kind of goes after that angle in terms of trying to logic and change somebody's mind, and it's just not going to happen. And it's what I learned with my own mom through that process of kind of going with the flow was, learning to take life not so seriously, that it didn't have to be black and white, and that there was a lot of gray and there was a lot of beautiful colors in between that I wasn't seeing before, because she allowed me to kind of play and use my imagination as long as nobody's getting hurt, It was all game, and it became fun and enjoyable instead of judgmental. Do you think, or did you see, because you talked with, families of the residents and, got to know the staff, did they make any comments when they saw the film, anything that kind of shocked them or changed their perception of the disease?
Well, I think that the biggest sort of shock for them was learning the news that it was going to be aired nationally. Just because, from the onset, I was mostly a small crew, and we were young filmmakers in the making process. And for them to hear, this is getting this national release, that was a big thing. And also, getting the release agreement signed, that took a process both to do it before we even filmed the project, but also before it aired on PBS, we had secondary releases signed as well. So in that process, we had a lot of the family members who watched the film before it aired, and we received, a lot of different responses. And I just think, the biggest thing that we heard was, I appreciate the total perspective of the project, and I think that you depicted my parent with as much respect and grace as you could. In one sequence, I think it was particularly tough because, and this is what happens when you make a film, there were residents who were passing away, every month or every 2 months. And I didn't know which residents would make it till the film aired on PBS. And so I had to be particularly sensitive about that because I didn't want this to be, presented to them right a week or two after they lost their parent or when they were still in the grieving process.
Sure.
But, to a large extent, it was amazing to hear that a lot of these parents were helping us with the Facebook and outreach efforts, and were telling their friends about the film. And some of the children of the residents came to screening events in the Bay Area when we were doing screenings there, at Stanford or the Contemporary Jewish Museum. And it was great to get their feedback and have them participate in the Q&A as well.
Oh, neat. Yeah, I can see where that would be really interesting. And then just when you've got a loved one with this disease, to know that they were part of something so big, pretty cool.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Well, very wonderful work that you've done. And it's so nice that it's so embraced and really changing lives on all different levels. And so I just have to give you kudos so much for this film. Again, the name of the film is You're Looking Like I Live Here, and I Don't. What's next for you, Scott?
Well, I'm currently trying to develop a new documentary that is, I'd say, a different perspective on birth and a woman's experience during the labor process. So I've been doing a lot of research with doulas and midwives around the United States and also abroad as well. I've been recently in Mexico and the Netherlands talking to some indigenous midwives. And so I'd say that is my greatest focus right now. And, I had the privilege, I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, so I did a lot of work with the Cherokee Preservation Foundation there as well.
Wonderful. Well, we're definitely looking forward to that as well. My daughter just had a baby a year ago, and boy, that was quite the process. So, I forgot how long ago it's been for me, and it just brings it all back. But things have really, really changed over the years, so I'm sure that that'll just be a beautiful film in and of itself. If people are interested in your film, You're Looking at Me Like I Live Here and I Don't, what's the best way for them to get a hold of a copy of that, or coordinate to have you come out? Do you still go out and do screenings of that, or is it best just for people to buy the DVD? Or
Sure. Well, it's a pretty, straightforward process because of the title. So our website is yourlookingatme.com. And then, we have Facebook and Twitter. Both of those are, Facebook is You're Looking at Me as well, and Twitter is You're Looking at Me too. And we have a pretty, broad network of people through both of those social media avenues. And then additionally, obviously folks can buy the DVD if they'd like to. Universities and public libraries can use the film. Nursing homes can use the film. We also have streaming versions of the film, pretty much every possibility here. So because with Amazon and Vimeo, and then also educational streaming too. And then if any organizations are interested in having me come out and participate in a panel discussion, they can always email me directly through the website for the film, and I will be able to talk through what that kind of entails and how to plan for these events and give them all the necessary publicity and outreach materials. So hopefully, I definitely encourage your listeners to reach out if they'd like, and if they have any questions about the project or how to use the film to the best of their abilities within the community, then definitely drop me a line by email.
Okay, great. And you were really gracious to offer our listeners and followers 10% off the DVD orders of the film. They just have to use the code Brunch with Lee. That's Brunch with Lee is the code. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Is there any last minute comment that you would like to make to our audience before we let you go?
I just want to say thanks for being a part of the community. It's a uphill battle, but it's amazing to see how much individuals are rallying around this cause. And, it's wonderful that you are able to do a podcast like this and that we're able to have this conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Keep up the great work, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be groveling to your website and ordering their copies, or maybe reaching out to you to have you participate in an event. It's a wonderful, wonderful film, very educational and emotional. I think people will get great insights from it. So don't miss out on this film. Again, the name of it is You're Looking at Me Like I Live Here and I Don't. Thank you again, Scott, for your time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we close out, I always just like to do some highlights. If you didn't listen to our show last week, we had Susan Rambos on, and she talked about brain injury that she personally had, and kind of correlates it to dementia symptoms. She doesn't necessarily have dementia, but the symptoms and the overlap was pretty interesting. We had a couple of people. Harry Urban was with us, along with Michael Ellenbogen, who both have dementia, and they were kind of shocked as well in terms of the similarities. Next week, we're going to have singer and pianist John Morehouse with us, and he his career has spanned over 40 years, and he has shared the stage with some of the most famous bands and singers in the world. So it'll be really fun to hear what he is up to. He's got a great series of 6 sing-alongs that he has done with DVDs that are sold for senior music therapy and recreation programs in 6 countries now. So we'll get to be able to hear about that. If you haven't had a chance to watch Dementia Chats, which we did a couple weeks ago, that's a video. We had Harry Urban, Pauline Gordon, Michael Ellenbogen, and Truthful Loving Kindness were our experts who are all diagnosed with dementia. And on that particular video, you'll see we talked about the loss of one of a great advocate over in Indonesia, Barry Pankhurst, and we talked about advocacy in general, and we also talked about emotional connections and disconnections when dealing with dementia as a whole. You can also, I wanted to just highlight, you can see a screening of Your Neighbor Phil at Polar Ridge Senior Living in North St. Paul in Minnesota at 2 p.m. on January 24th if you're interested. And then I'll be out in Seattle February 8th through the 13th doing several venues out in that area as well. A couple of great blog posts you might want to read. One is called Mama's Hands, beautiful poem written by one of our community members. And then Kevin Wu wrote an interesting article called Driving Mr. Jim that has some great perceptions in it, lots of comments on that. And there's several others that are going to be coming out this week that I think you'll really like as well. So we will talk to you all next week. In the meantime, don't forget about applying the tools from your memory chip, which teaches us to really focus on, are they safe, are they happy, and are they pain-free? Have a great week, everyone. Bye now. Hi, I'm Lori LeBay, and I wanted to tell you about Alzheimer Speaks, which is another great podcast. You see, my own mother lived with dementia for 30 years, and I felt lost. Did you know every 3 seconds someone in the world is being diagnosed with dementia? Odds are it's going to hit your families too. We want to help you connect to services, products, tools, research, and stories so you can be prepared. Please subscribe to Alzheimer Speaks on your favorite podcast platform.